Is this legit? I'm Sophie, tech marketer and social scientist. When I'm not advising tech startups on their marketing strategies, I'm helping protect everyday folks from online threats.
I'm Chris, a marketer with a background in both agencies and tech companies.
This week on, is this legit?
I don't think anybody really dreams of labor. I never dreamt of sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours as well.
Yep.
Nothing glamorous about that.
Welcome to another episode of Is This Legit? And today we're going to discuss whether a 9 to 5 is legit.
Preliminary answer from Sophie, no.
What a bit of a caveat. It's not all bad. Maybe. I don't know.
It's gotten me all the way here. So yes.
It sounds like it was something very bad for you.
No, it wasn't very bad. I left the in-house 9 to 5 life less than a year ago. And best decision I've ever done. But again, other caveat, it's not for everybody.
Yes, but it's interesting because when we're discussing this topic, then it is important to kind of introduce this background. So started out with a 9 to 5 and now does her own thing. I am in a 9 to 5 and I've gone through also very different work modes. I've worked in China before, which is not very 9 to 5 friendly. It's 996, which is from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., 6 days a week. So now I'm doing a 9 to 5 and actually it seems like a luxury to me. It's amazing.
Does it feel hard to stick to 9 to 5 days?
Not really. I mean, the reality is that it's never 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Some days it's less, some days it's more, and you have to kind of, evaluate yourself, if this makes sense to do more or less in those days.
Yeah, because we're talking about 9 to 5s that are salaried.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So 9 to 5s that are hourly have a way different whatever.
Yes.
This, it's definitely, we're talking about 9 to 5 corporate style jobs.
Yes.
Where they don't mean really 40 hours.
But I kind of wanted to start this episode with a bit of a historical context of why do we even have a 9 to 5? Where did it all come from? So I've been reading how people used to work back in the days. And I think in the medieval ages, around those days, people imagined that it was just tough times all the time. You were out on the fields or hustling and working. And what I realized is actually people didn't work that much back in the days. It was a lot of you would do some field work and then there was a lot of kind of just chilling all year round. You just collected your crops and there were a lot of festivities around that. And that was it. So it wasn't, times were tough. Times were definitely hard, but there was a lot of leisure time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, around the industrialization era,
Mm-hmm.
when we started having factories, that's where people started going into work. And it was anybody, women, men, children. And they were working in factories, breaking their backs. I don't know, maybe not 24/7, but they were really long days, very unhealthy.
So the difference really is kind of, if we're putting it in kind of 10 days words or standards of comparison, working for yourself ish, because you still technically have a landlord, even if you're a farmer, chances are you're not the owner of your land.
Yes.
But nobody's going to be literally there over your shoulder, versus in a factory, they are literally watching you from the second floor.
What a whip and chain.
Almost, right? So that is kind of, I guess, a difference there as well.
Yes.
I feel like the amount of micromanagement.
Yeah, the 9 to 5, it became more of a norm around the 1800s. Through World War II, there were a lot of worker movements. So there was the steady decline in the length of the workday. And the big steep drop happened during the 1920s. So yeah, in the mid 1800s, working hours for the week were 70 hours plus. That was really common.
For factory workers.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it was the Industrial Revolution and the factory work that influenced the rise of the 9 to 5 structure.
Mm.
So it's funny because like I hear often this rhetoric that the 9 to 5 is like kept meant to keep you like in prison, and it's the corporations that made this law, and that's like a big misunderstanding because it's actually the employees, the workers who were fighting for the 9 to 5.
Because they were working more.
Yes,
Got it.
yes. So it was created and fought by for the workers, and there were a bunch of workers and unions who wanted to have this humane work-life balance from the previous work system that offered next to none of workers' rights and could then enforce these extreme work hours without any repercussions. So, capitalists and business owners did not create and design the 40-hour work week to keep you bored at your cubicle. It's the workers who wanted to reduce the 12 plus hour workdays of hard and dangerous industrial labor to a more humane 8 hours, along with laws against child labor and better worker safety.
Yeah.
So, what they had. Um, there was this fantastic slogan with 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours for what you will. So you have your leisure time, and it's not defined what you do with that time belongs to you, and it almost like brings this like structure to your life that is believed to be pretty much like optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because in Finland, where we live, the 8 hour workday was established in 1917. So it's actually not that long time ago, like
100 years ago.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
And in Denmark, even later in 1919, after a whole year-long campaign led by workers. So if you've ever wondered where the May Day or Labor Day celebration came from, that's all of these labor movements that, set us free into our 8 hour
In a way.
workdays. Yeah.
But it also feels like going the whole work people until they can't work anymore. So 12 hours or even 8 hours makes, even from like the business owner's perspective, makes sense when like more hours is just more output.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm building a widget of whatever, and like, yeah, I can be tired, but like, okay, I could be technically less efficient at 8 hours, but technically my hands can still kind of keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we're thinking of like now, where most people are not doing like factory style, like
hand labor.
Like, how do you scale building more widgets, more people, or more machines?
Mm-hmm.
How do you scale more knowledge workers? Well, it's not more people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like more downtime for them so that they can actually be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So if you work them for 8 to 12 hours, you're not actually getting more out of them. You're just getting shittier out of them.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's a special kind of tired when you've spent like 8 hours behind your laptop, like staring at the glowing screen, trying to like come up with something that is like mildly interesting, something that is mildly, makes sense even like when you read it.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that. And that actually is interesting because those like thoughts, that's something that people started like really thinking about like around COVID, right? Like that's where I feel like that wider sentiment of like, when people couldn't leave their houses, go to the office, and they were sitting in their houses for like to do work.
Yeah.
That's kind of where people started, noticing that, hey, I can get my work done as I'm doing my laundry and, sitting on the couch. And some like there were videos or, people giving these like hacks on how to like keep your team's like little bubble like active. So they were like just moving the mouse and like doing some other stuff in the meantime. So I think there was this like great disillusionment with like corporate and like office work, and also a bit of like this hostility from the employer's side because they were like seeing those like hacks and things that people were doing.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember all these like TikToks of somebody, working from home and actually they're at Target, and then like a Teams call comes in and you're like, oh crap, like what do I do?
Oh my God. Yeah. I think it comes a lot from the mindset of I own you and your time and your capacity for a certain number of hours in a day, rather than I hired somebody who should be able to do a specialized job, and I trust that the output is going to be there, whether it's done in 2 hours or 8 or 10 or whatever. Like, I think people are starting to come to the recognition that, well, if it's taking you 10 hours to do a job that the average person would take 6 for, then you're not organizing your time right. Like, what the hell are you fiddling around with, right? But then there's still well, if I need to be at the office at 8 and I need to leave at 5 and I have, like my brain's fried from whatever, then I guess I'm just going to scroll around and do whatever and call it research. Like, and it's almost like making both sides feel resentful.
I've experienced that in my previous jobs, like in China when I worked in marketing agencies there. Like it is expected of you. Like there is no 9 to 5, right? It's it's a completely other schedule. So when I would come into the office at 9 a.m., there was nobody there because they were doing overtime last night. So people would start showing up around 10, 11 a.m. And there's something finally to review by like the evening. The client is still giving you feedback. So everyone is stuck there like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And then everyone's going home at like 10, 11, 12.
So no wonder they're coming in later.
Yeah. So it was like this toxic kind of like this circle that you can't really get out because it's just so embedded into the work culture. And it was not just my agency. I had a network of other people working in agencies and in advertising, and it was pretty much all over there. It was expected of you. Like it was not like really a shock if you move from another agency to a new agency. It's not going to change. Like your salary is going to change, your role might change, but the work schedule would not. And so I would say like the majority of people working at agencies were really young.
Because you don't have as many responsibilities.
Exactly.
So
I cannot imagine people with kids living in that like schedule and rhythm. Like even if I was done with my work and then I didn't have to like present something to my client in China, I would still sit around there sometimes just because of companionship. Like others are still at work. Like how can I get up? It's almost like bizarre that you're leaving early, which is it's not even early.
Yeah.
So yeah, in Finland, it's definitely like I see that people my age and younger than me, they can have like families, responsibilities, they have hobbies outside of work because it's not frowned upon for you to like pack up your things at 4:30 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. So then it's almost like we've gone from 12-hour days to forced 8-hour days to back to 12-hour days because nobody's actually checking hours anymore.
Yes.
But they're expecting an output, and that output is just not doable in 5 hours. Because, well, this is my opinion on that, and one of the reasons also why I left. The amount of non-decisions and useless meetings and back and forth on how we should do this and that and whatever.
Let's take this online.
Yes.
And now let's take it offline.
Oh my God. And then it never ends.
It never
ends. And so like one of the reasons why I also left that life was because half of my time was spent in useless like filling of time. It feels like filling of time. Like I could basically like get the right people in a room, figure out, okay, this is the problem we're trying to solve it in 2-3 hours. And then that'd be like, the plan would be done. like done. Then I could literally go work for a month
Mhm.
on whatever we could decide in like 3 hours. Like, why do we have to have like 3 times weekly hour about what? Like, there's literally no reason for that.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like the meetings are there for politics. And
it is a lot of like stakeholder management, right?
And so if like technically your day is 8 hours, but you spend like, I don't know, maybe like 2 hours of that, like catching up on communication or whatever,
Oh my
like
God, yeah,
email,
Slack.
Slack, whatever. Okay, fine. And then you spend maybe another 2 to 3 hours of that in meetings,
Mhm.
like synchronous
There's
meetings.
no time to do work.
So then that's 5 hours already. You need to eat. And so to do your actual job, you maybe have a couple hours left, but your brain's already spent.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, there's the solution of like, blocking time off, blah, blah, and, no meeting days, et cetera, et cetera. But like, it's almost like the 9 to 5 is like 9 to 5 that I want to see your face, and then go do your real job after the 9 to 5.
Yeah. It's there's a lot to do with like company culture, company politics, and I would say that maybe we are a bit biased because it is like advertising marketing that we're specifically talking about, and it's hard to say if like engineers have the same issue or devs have the same issue.
I think they have a different issue, but it's not necessarily wrong, like, or that different in the sense that like they are very much motivation driven because they are looking for creative solutions to complex problems, which even though marketing is taking a different approach, we also are looking for creative solutions to complex problems. And sometimes that means that they work until 3 a.m. But not because they have to in terms of workload, but because, well, that's when the thing is just happening in their brain.
Yeah.
And it happens for us too.
Oh yeah, there's many times where I'm like sitting and chilling and I'm like, oh, I have a great idea. It's 10 p.m. I'm going to have to like write it down or like tweak on it.
And if you don't do it then it's not going to happen.
It's gone.
So then if you set those kinds of like boundaries of, well, my 8-hour day is then to then, and then that's it. It's like, okay, that's all fun and dandy, but all of that 8 hours is going to be spent working at the same time as the other people that are bothering you from doing your actual job.
Yeah.
And then when you actually do have the inspiration because you had 2 hours to calm down and to like just like stare at the wall for a bit, whatever. And then suddenly you're like, okay, I can actually do this thing. And then it's like, then you feel guilty for working overtime. Then people are like, why are you live on Slack? And you should not be here. Go have fun and live your life. And it's just like, well, if I had time to stare at the wall during the day, then I could actually do this. But because I can't, because I need to sit there and explain the thing to this person and try to pull out the nuggets from this other person because they don't know how to actually tell me what they want. But what's the worst that's going to happen if you do it the next morning at 8? Nothing. And to be honest, in marketing, it's the same.
Oh yeah, it's never an emergency. We're not saving lives. Sanity check for all the marketers. When you feel overwhelmed,
you're not saving lives.
You're not saving lives. You can take a break. It's fine. I'm currently reading a book by Jenny Odell. It's called How to Do Nothing. And it does mostly have to do with, how we're sucked into the online world and it's kind of like taking us over. And it's like fine to like not listen to podcasts or be hyper online and, go outside, smell the roses. But she talked about a very interesting performance art piece. And it was actually here in Finland in a Deloitte office. So there's this performance artist called Pilvi Takala. And what she did is she obviously talked to somebody at the office. So she got to, there were people who knew what she's doing, but she would go to the office, sit in the sales and tax department, and she just sat at the table. No computer, no nothing. And she just sat and she stared at the wall, stared at the window. And people got really bothered there. They were like, who are you? And she's like, I'm a new intern. And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you waiting for somebody? And I'm like, no, I'm just like thinking about research. And they were like, all right. And people would just like walk past by and they're like, they started sending emails to the management like, who is this girl? Why is she sitting there? She hasn't done anything for like 5 hours straight. Is everything okay? So that was kind of her way of showcasing how bizarre it is for people when there's somebody at the office who is visibly not doing anything, that it's so out of the norm to just stare at the wall within these spaces.
That's so interesting. So I was listening to a podcast, as we do, a few weeks ago, and the interview was, I think it was on Trevor Noah's show, and he was talking to John Chu, who makes movies. And he does some commercial stuff, some musical, dance, whatever, but he's a pretty darn good filmmaker, right? Pretty productive, efficient. And he was saying, he's like, sometimes it's funny, like my wife looks at me like just like staring at the wall, walking, like pacing for like 3 hours straight. I'm not like writing anything. I'm not at a computer. I'm just literally pacing or just sitting there. And he's like, it must look so weird. I'm just staring out the window for an hour. And he's like, if I can't do that, nothing is going to happen. Nothing's going to come out. Like the brain's going, right? But people can't see that. And people who haven't experienced that, I don't think everybody's brain works that way. And people who haven't experienced that, they don't get it, right? And so they might see somebody like this artist who's at the office and she's like, yeah, I'm doing research. Like I can literally sit there. I can do this. I do it at home. Like where I have a whiteboard and I wrote stuff and I'm just staring at it for an hour. And my brain's doing all these things. And eventually I'll write stuff down. But like, I could literally sit there with my coffee and stare at the thing for an hour.
Normalize just sitting.
Yes.
Is what I would like to say. Like
because it's not doing nothing. Like your brain needs to compute stuff. Yes. Like if you see it as like, they're talking about like AI and artificial intelligence. I'm like, what about like normal human intelligence? The thing that actually built the AI? Okay, like,
and it's freaking amazing. And I think we're so taken away with like, we've normalized the busy work, which is going to meetings and, writing some lists and sending some emails and like blah, blah, blah. And it's almost like nobody thinks that it's normal to just sit and think and get strategic, like take a step back from all the busy work and just kind of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And same with you. Like for me, the best way to like where my brain starts to thinking the most is when I just go for a walk in the nature. And like, I don't listen to a podcast. I don't listen to any music. I would say that in like these days, it's almost like crazy to go out and like not consume anything, like not look at your phone, not look at some TikToks, just be with yourself.
Yeah.
And just see what your brain starts doing when it's allowed to be completely silent.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to the 9-to-5s, the corporate world. And I don't know if you've felt that. Maybe it's just me being hyper online and reading all the news headlines, but I feel like there's been a big disillusionment with work, especially after COVID, where suddenly, the pandemic, well, it didn't end, but it somewhat ended and like life's back to normal. And there are a lot of these back to office mandates.
Yeah.
So there's been people who obviously like moved out of the city and they can't come to the office like that anymore. There's a lot of people who realize that commuting is time suck for them. So there's been a lot of this animosity towards kind of like going back to work.
Yeah. Well,
I've seen people quit because they don't. Yeah.
So we were basically told this team is not doing very good. We need to collaborate better. So this team, not the whole company, this team has mandatory return to office part-time.
Oh my God.
And I quit that same week because I'm like, I'm sorry, but no. Like, and I do like going to the office.
Yeah.
But the expectation of this is like mandatory because we can't figure out how to collaborate better otherwise is insane. Like the clients that I have that I consult with, I have never met in person,
Mm.
yet we're in the same country and we work together perfectly fine.
Mhm.
Our meetings always end early, like, because we know what needs to get done. We make the decision and then we move on.
Yeah.
And then I see them again 2 weeks later and it's like, well, there we go. I'm one of those. I was like, return to office. Okay, bye. That was it.
Oh my God. With all of that, I've started seeing this people trying to like sneak around or like kind of like hack the 9 to 5 and the works thing. There's the whole overemployed movement.
Oh, right.
Where people have multiple jobs because okay, they can work remote and then they can fit in multiple work into the 9 to 5.
Right.
And then another interesting thing that I found was on Reddit. There's an entire subreddit called antiwork.
Oh yes, I follow.
And it's an interesting space because some of these, like, yes, I feel like a lot of their content is like valid. They follow people, like news about companies wanting to like, or employees wanting to like unionize. So in like Walmart, there's like people going on strike in Boeing. So like all of that is like pretty valid. But then there's also people who are like, I got rejected from the TSA because I had like a suicide attempt and they don't like, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of sounds valid. Like they wouldn't, why would they hire you? But then there's people kind of cheering like, yeah, like you should sue them. And I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of people who just don't understand how work works. And they find themselves not being able to, navigate this like modern work and kind of like as an excuse, like, a means to like radicalize.
Right. I mean, to be fair, so I worked at a bank for many years and you could not get hired at a bank if you had had a bankruptcy in, I think it was like 7 years or 10 years or something.
Which is valid.
So, I mean, even if you didn't have to manage other people's money, like even a bank teller, they would not hire them if they had been personally bankrupt because they work at a bank managing money.
Yeah.
Right. And so like there are some things that are kind of valid that you have to kind of, I guess, separate from, oh, it's just
it's not personal. It's just a requirement. Like the same with pilots. Like if they had like a bout of depression and suicide attempts in their records, like I probably would not want this person to be responsible for an entire plane full of people.
I mean, they have to have perfect vision.
That too, yes.
So I can't be a pilot. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely kind of like the disillusionment, the whole like job market right now, I think globally is kind of really weird because there has been some change in the pandemic. The economic situation is kind of different. We work in tech and like tech has had all these weird rounds of too much funding, over hiring, layoffs, hiring again, layoffs, blah, 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 whatever. And like that's its own different kind of like insecurity. So it's really kind of hard for a lot of like knowledge workers even to get jobs right now.
And it's so stark, this comparison between like what was just happening a few years ago, like where it was pretty, companies were hiring, right? And then the economy went to shit, and the fastest way to like get, this like the stock situation fixed again was to let a lot of people go. Like there were like mass layoffs. And I think, again, it's maybe partially because of social media where a lot of people who were let go, they were recording the moment where they were like, summoned into this like big group call and like being let go. And I remember also vividly where there was a CEO who had to let go a bunch of people, and he posted on LinkedIn like a photo of himself crying,
oh my
like
God, I
saying
remember that.
How this was the hardest thing that he had to do. So I think there's definitely like this, oh shit, like the companies don't care about us, which is like true, but it's never like, it's kind of like understanding the bigger picture, which really helps kind of like, it's not about me. It's not that, there's this hostility towards me specifically. It's a bigger trend.
Yeah. I like to go back a little bit on the whole like overemployment situation. I think it's gone in a direction of, it took a negative turn mostly because there's still the thinking of I own you for 8 hours. And like you should not be doing other things for 8 hours, and that should be that. And to be fair, like, yeah, there's the whole, like, you shouldn't be working for competing, interests, and that's perfectly valid. And, if you say you're going to do something and you're actually in two different meetings at the same time for two different companies, okay, that's not super ethical.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about those cases. But when I was working full time, before I would take on any external consulting clients, I would always check, make sure it was written down. HR knew, legal knew, and I would do it on my own time, right? I might take a meeting during the week, and then the rest of the time I would do weekends. I would do evenings. And, I made sure that it did not coincide with whatever my employee work was. But it never was a problem, right?
I think it again depends really on the company, because my in the States, he's like, I don't even dare to like list my side projects on my LinkedIn because my boss is going to see it and he's like, what is this? What is this? Should be working for me
on the weekend.
He does it because that, even what he's afraid of is that it's going to signal that he's about to like leave.
Right. Well, see, that's also the kind of like psychological safety that's missing in the, like, I employ you to be all into this thing. And it's like, I was working at a startup a few years ago, and I don't usually have a filter when I talk to people, which can get me in trouble. But anywho, I told one of the co-founders, I was like, like, y'all are posting that you're working on the weekend and da 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 da. And like, it's great that this is your baby, but you have to realize that every single person that is an employee, it is not their baby. You can't even internally get upset at them for not believing in your vision mission as much as you, because it is not their baby, right?
It's just their 9 to 5.
Exactly, right? And so like the whole, I own all of your brain power to this thing is actually detrimental.
I would almost say like, I pay you, so you dance monkey.
It's almost that, right? Yeah. I feel like the whole overemployment, it almost feels like I want to make sure that every single moment of time that your brain space is available is spent thinking about the problem that I want solved, right? And what I don't think employers realize is that by having a variety of other interests, people end up actually being more efficient in their quote unquote like day job, 9 to 5, because they end up being able to do things and learn skills that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
Sometimes your job is so specialized that, like, when I was on a team of 5 versus a team of 30 versus like sole external consultant, like the amount of things that I was able to do and develop in are very different. Because then if you're in a bigger team, then you're seen as, oh, I'm stepping on other people's toes. Okay, the other person doesn't want me in their, okay, fine, I'll let them do their thing, but I'm kind of interested in kind of, learning that thing or whatever. And so you end up staying in your lane, and then your mind does end up kind of going elsewhere because you don't have those development opportunities necessarily in your day job. So if you kind of hold people restricted to that, they're going to start hiding it. So it's almost like, let people have their hobbies and bring their full selves to their 9 to 5, and you'll have less disengagement.
Yeah, the quiet quitting.
Well, I mean, to be honest, even that quiet quitting, like, I feel like that's such a misnomer, because it's like, oh, because now I'm actually only doing what's in my job description, suddenly
it's almost funny. Like, it's okay to like not be hyper productive all the time, because that's how life is as well. And like, look, I will have my days where I'm like, literally, I will do what is like expected of me, but like I can't because that's just how I am. And I think it's also just understanding that humans are not robots. Like, we can be at our peak, and some days like I am just low, and the only thing I can think of like is wrapping up this day and just climbing in the cave and watching some Netflix and relaxing.
But you know, the funniest thing is that we feel like we definitely have enough work for 2 to 3 people, you know, that one person does. And yet there's all these people that are unemployed that have similar skills. Like, how is it so that we have come to a point where we feel in society that it's better to have people that are overworked and other people that are unemployed rather than have 2 people doing that job?
Well, that all comes down to somebody doing the math and realizing that, and the person doing the math does not know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of this. There are people who are responsible on the finance side and making sure that everything is like tip top and, you know, the company isn't sinking. And then there's people who are actually on the battlefield executing the shit. And they think that, oh, if I could like clone myself, I could have like 3 Christinas instead of 1. Like, we could do so much more. And that's where you have to like draw the line. Like, okay, if there's no more resources for this, then we need to understand that whatever these requirements or needs are, we need to tone it down a bit, because you can't give more when you don't receive anymore.
Yeah.
And that's hard, obviously, because you have your boss, you have your OKRs, KPIs,
whatever metrics.
Yeah.
You know, on that note, like, and so with my husband, we've talked, he's an engineer, and we've kind of talked about, instead of scoping projects by what the output should be, scoping things by time we have. So do we want to have something out in a week or in 3 months? Not, do we want it to look like a Hollywood movie? And if we're like, actually, like, it would make the most sense to have something out in a month, how far can we bring it in a month? And then scope it to that. Whatever we can't prioritize in time constraint, then it's not happening. And the thing is, in tech, there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more features, always going to be more campaigns, always going to be more something. At one point, like, more is just more. It's not necessarily better, right? And so kind of changing the mindset of, hey, we have these, like, you know, no budget, but we want to have a Netflix level commercial or whatever. But, you know, here's the, you know, basically 20% of one person's time, and they have 2 weeks to do it.
Well, that comes to educating the people who are making these asks, right? Or even the project manager being very like strict with, all right, there's a gap between what you're wishing for and the resources and the time that we have. So there's always 3 factors. You have, you know, what you want, the quality, there's time, and there's the money. So if you take something away, like, the other like part will also like drop. You can't do it faster if you take away resources or you want like better quality. But yeah, the whole anti-work sentiment, I think that's been it's provided a great breeding ground for MLMs and other scammers and crypto bros that are trying to,
the side hustle.
Yes, that are trying to profit from it. So it's I've seen a lot of these guys, you know, particularly crypto bros with content like the 9 to 5 is a scam, so you should better start investing. And it's like, what should I start investing with when I just like quit my job? Like, I don't have any income to invest. Same with like MLMs, where they're like, 9 to 5 is a scam, and actually 9 to 5 is the real pyramid scheme, where you have the CEO at the top, and then you have your manager, and then you have like all of you employees, and then you should like be your own boss. But then suddenly you're stuck with all of these like lipsticks that you can't sell to anyone, and you're not even guaranteed a salary for the effort that you're putting in. So that's like very interesting.
Yeah, you know, like, this kinds of, it gets me thinking. I've, you know, talked about this with other kinds of people that are like, oh, you know, maybe I should, you know, fully go into consulting and because like I can make my full-time salary with like a fraction of the time that I was doing before, because now I don't have to deal with any office politics. We agree on a thing, and then I just do the thing. Like, there's no like if they don't agree with the plan, then they're the clients, like whatever. Okay, then just tell me what you want and then I'll just do the thing. Right.
Yeah.
And what I try to explain to people, and this is why also kind of the whole piggybacking on other ideas like, MLMs or whatever else, trendy investment situation, whatever else, is that good ideas happen. Good execution is more important. The problem is that even like brilliant ideas don't happen very often. And so if you want to go in business for yourself, you need to have something to sell. And how do you differentiate yourself? And what's your positioning? And what's your unique selling point? And all the, whatever you learn in business school, like what's so different about you? Why should people give a fuck what you're doing and what you're selling? Now, it almost feels like some other kinds of business frameworks are like trying to take the uncertainty of that out of the equation by being like, all you have to do is, invest in stocks. All you have to do is buy some NFTs. All you have to do is a thing. And then you're free to be your own boss.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's also like buy my guide on like learn how to do drop shipping or sell stuff on Amazon. And it's like, is that like, do you understand how hard it is to do something in a way that will actually profit you in that field?
Sustainably.
Yes.
Because the thing is, I'm sure like you can, drop ship and make some money for a certain amount of time, but it's not sustainable business. And eventually like,
what's the exit plan? What's the next step?
Exactly.
Because you can use it as a crutch, like fair enough. Like if you want to, do it as a side hustle, but what's the big plan?
Yeah. And I think like, even if let's say somebody has like awesome skills on whatever, and they could technically like, I hate, the kind of word consultant feels very MLM, but anyway, like kind of like, advisor work that I do, like I'm pretty half decent and at what I do. And that's why I do get clients and I can live, well with whatever money I make from that. But even if you do have that, and even if you do have a niche and an angle that you can sustain yourself fully, even then it's not for everybody, right? Because even then, like I need to do like my own kind of mini marketing of myself. Like I don't need to do a lot to get customers. I don't take like one-off projects mostly. Like, so there's not a lot of that needs to happen, but I still need to do my own accounting. Luckily, I worked in accounting for many years, so I know how to do it, right?
But if you don't, then you have to hire somebody.
Or you need to learn, and then you make mistakes, and then you pay extra taxes because you didn't do the right thing right, and et cetera, right? Yeah. But there's still kind of like downsides. Like, who do I lean on when I need to bounce ideas? Like, I'm lucky that I've made a lot of professional friends along the way. And I can like pester people, be like, yo, I have this idea. I'm struggling on this or this or that. So, like, I just need like somebody to give me a sanity check. But not everybody has built that network for themselves.
Or if they just like even start out, right? Like you've never worked in that field and you did like a course. And if you quit the 9 to 5, like, of course you got rid of your shitty boss.
Yeah.
But you also like, removed yourself from this like big network of people who are dedicated all on working on the same goal.
Yeah.
As you said, like there are people who need the structure to keep them accountable.
Yeah.
And like it actually requires a lot of discipline to be like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and like I'm in my bed instead of taking a nap. Like I'm definitely like when I think of like working in my bed, I will do 10 minutes and then I'm like nap time. So that's when I'm like, I do need the structure and I do need to go to the office on that day because otherwise I'm going to be because home is my sanctuary and I want to chill.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So even when I was in 9 to 5, there were definitely times where like, so, now I've basically been working in cybersecurity for a few years now. And like, there are things that happen that are right now, right? And in a normal 9 to 5, it's kind of like what's going to impact the business not much. Like not much is like that tomorrow's
Yeah.
going to do a thing. But sometimes when like, you know, breaches are happening or there's like vulnerabilities that are being found or whatever else in those kinds of sectors, then you kind of want to talk about that stuff as it's going. So it's more like around news cycle style, you know, schedule. In B2B tech, like sauce, whatever, like that's never a thing. Very rarely is something newsworthy, right? And so if, at least for me, like if I'm in 9 to 5 and I'm in house, I'm like, if something's happening at 5 p.m., I'm like, well, it's going to go out tomorrow. Oh, we're going to be late. I'm like, we're not a news org. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. But for the bigger picture, I do want to do the thing and put it out so that I can help people not get stuck in whatever this, you know, thing is. And so it has happened where I get a tip like early in the morning where like, oh, this is happening. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is an active, like phishing campaign. It's happening right now. Like there's this one investigation. I basically started at 8 a.m. that morning when I got the tip and went through the whole analysis of the whole campaign, found all of the different, like, you know, steps along the way. They were all still live. And it went live at 11 p.m. that night. And yeah, okay, I didn't work as much the next day or whatever. But if you're in an environment where that is expected to be the norm, that you're always going to just jump in, it's not sustainable. I did it because I had enough freedom to decide, like, hey, this is a thing. Everybody else agrees. There's nothing that's urgent right now. This is what's happening. Don't bother me. I will be unavailable. I will work like 15 hours or whatever it is. But then it's out, right?
Yeah.
If then you're stuck in kind of the, well, I need to leave at 5 because otherwise there's no boundaries. Otherwise I'm like, that's it. Those golden nuggets never happen because I've had others that have come up and then kind of be almost like guilted in working too much, right? And I'm like, yeah, I can just like work a double day today and not work tomorrow. And that's not healthy for you. Like, I agree. But also this is gold. And tomorrow
It's old news.
But it's not just old news. It's that tomorrow there's going to be other priorities.
Yeah.
Tomorrow there's going to be something else. And then 3 weeks later, a month later, it's still not the priority. Right? So it's almost like it's starting to lose the newness factor. And then the long-term factor isn't as worth it. And it's almost like, I get that, you know, some businesses are also like, hey, 9 to 5, like leave, go.
Yeah.
Like that's good in the sense that people do tend to overwork in our field. But then when there is something, you know, like we've worked on like multimedia campaigns together where it's like, we're at the office and it's 7 p.m. and it happens. But we had a whole filming day. Like it happens.
I feel like at least in our team, it's like, hey, if you do overwork, like start later today or like the next day.
Yeah.
Like it's totally fine. Like we are at least like lucky with, reasonable like bosses in that sense.
Yeah. I feel.
And also the flex days. Let's not talk about that.
Right.
That's like, you did like overtime, you deserve a day off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like it's probably hard for a lot of people to work in an environment necessarily that's that flexible because it's almost like, well, I would like a task list, please. And I need to know exactly what's expected of me. Otherwise, I can't figure that out for myself. And then, you kind of need a lot more structure. But at least I've seen in, high performers in tech, if you give them too much of that, like their brain shuts off. It's like, okay, so I'm a machine. I'm a monkey.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, and none of that gold ever comes because, like the most creative stuff that comes out is always going to be in times where like you're just left to your own devices.
Don't tell me how to do things. Just tell me what you want and I'll figure out the way.
Yes.
Like that's kind of.
But I think the 9 to 5 exists because a lot of people are not like that.
Yeah.
And I think we're both like that. So it's sometimes hard maybe to like understand why the system and the structure is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I personally have a hard time working with people that are like, I need the exact list of the things, and I have to have the path done for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to do that for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want somebody to do it for me, you know? And so it's, I would be curious to know, like, what is the percentage of like knowledge workers, corporate workers, whatever we want to call it, like
Mm-hmm.
that fit into the, like, give me the goal and then set me free kind of, and I'll come back with
Yeah.
something brilliant, versus the people that actually need, like, give me the exact things. I need to
Give
know
me the map.
exactly
Yeah.
the, I would be curious to know what the actual, like, I don't know if there's been any studies, but if what's the actual like percentage of people in the population that fit into either of those categories, um, or whether there's even a blind spot, and there's other types of people that don't even fit into either or. But yeah,
MBTI, everyone.
No.
Kidding.
Future episode,
Oh my God, what was it?
personality tests. Use it for self-exploration, not to decide who you hire.
Oh yes.
Is how I see it. Anyway. Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of also touch upon like two different movements that we have that kind of
Mhm.
like arose from the, anti-work. So on one hand, we have the hustle culture,
Yeah.
which we sort of touched upon already as well. But then we have the anti-ambition, which is,
Aha.
I don't know if you've seen those. There was a time around COVID where there were a lot of videos with the title of "I Don't Dream of Labor."
Yeah.
So let's start with the hustle culture. So there's been on one side this push to monetize hobbies and turn every waking hour that you have into productivity. So there's this idea of almost breaking free from the matrix, which is like it's so funny. Enjoy living in the matrix,
Yeah.
or take the red pill.
Yeah.
So, and that's also something that a lot of these like get rich fast gurus are promoting, that and they actually call it the matrix. Like, get out of it.
Yeah.
So there's this push to set up a side hustle for people who shouldn't even try to run a business. So that's what we talked about. Do like drop shipping and 5 different other side gigs. There's a bit of that like FIRE movement as well. So that's what was it? Financial.
I have not heard of that.
Oh my God. It was called something financial independence, retire early.
Aha.
That's FIRE. And that almost leads to this like extreme frugality and like, and trying to find ways to like monetize every like single moment that you have. So that's why a lot of people go into that have a job, do also Uber driving on the side or door dashing on the side. And I wonder if there's a bit of again, I like to blame social media for all the things that are wrong, but there's, I would say that this generation and people in general, but I would say maybe the millennials and Gen Z, that they have this exposure to these more alternative means of earning income, such as, YouTube, for example. Being, influencers, doing e-commerce or drop shipping, crypto, even like SoundCloud or Spotify. There's a lot of artists who started out from SoundCloud. So there's these like odd success stories, like Mr. Beast. He makes a shit ton of money on YouTube. There's a lot of opportunities in being influencers. But again, that's not I would say that yes, these seem like an easy way to earn money because I'm online, I can just like start an account and start doing influencing stuff, like start doing content. But and you can be your own boss and start kind of skip the 9 to 5. But what people don't actually realize is that it's hard being your own boss. It's hard being disciplined. It's hard to even kind of understand what's going on if you're alone, and like if you don't have a team, like who's going to create the content for you, who's going to edit it. Like in the end, you're going to be doing more work than you would at a 9 to 5 because there is no limit. Like if you stop working, then your business is stopped. Like
Yeah.
it's stopped. Like there's nothing going on. So, and you have to be ready. Like even if you're doing sales, you have to be ready to respond to off hours like requests. If something's wrong with your e-commerce shop and people are asking you for help on a Saturday or a Sunday, like, and they don't get a resolution, like there's a sale that just like fell through.
Yeah. I think a big problem is that all we see is basically survivorship bias, right? We see the success stories.
Yes.
And even when we kind of know that not everybody is successful, we put the blame on the person and not on the system, not on the situation, right? So we're like, oh, they just didn't hustle hard enough, or they didn't try hard enough.
Which is the worst thing ever, like somebody not trying hard enough.
Right? And the thing is that even if they work all the long hours, it's very much possible that the reason why they were not successful at hustling or whatever and doing the influencer life or whatever it is, right? That it's just that the system is also kind of like stacked against you, right? So like, how long has Mr. Beast been around? Like it's
like 10 years of like constantly doing content.
There's the
like
early,
who has even the patience? Like ask yourself, do you want to be there like putting out content for 10 years and maybe
one video costs millions of dollars to make? Mr. Beast, yes, right now.
But like back in the days.
True, but still, right? People are like, oh, it looks homemade. It can't be that bad, right? Well, yes, it takes, we were talking yesterday about like, how long does it actually take to like from idea to live for a short, like vertical reel style clip? Well, an hour, 2 hours, something like that, right? Yeah. Where like the clip might be 10 seconds. Yeah. And it still takes an hour.
Yeah. Planning easily. And everything, production.
And that is just editing. For the output of the marketing you need to do to actually fuel your actual business, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I think a lot of like that, like hustle culture, I don't know, misinformation or whatever it is. It's like, yes, we see the Instagrammability of the thing where everything looks perfect and we only see the perfect output, whatever. But it's the same rhetoric that we hear with, so-and-so dropped out of college and this other one dropped out of college. I'm like, sure, they all dropped out and founded.
Because they had a brilliant idea that they wanted to work on. Like,
sure,
Mark Zuckerberg, like he already had a business or like something when he dropped out.
Well, so here's the thing is that, sure, but there are plenty of people that have good ideas and drop out and do the thing.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is that if we look at it from, what do these people have in common? Oh, they all dropped out. So that must be the thing. But if you actually look at it the other way, look at the pool of people who did not go to college and look at the pool of people that didn't graduated, the actual like earning potential is just higher in general for the ones that have had advanced degrees, right? So I get that like in the short term and what we see are like, oh, the success stories are dropouts. It's like, yeah, the 1% of the 1%. But if you look at the pool as a whole, it makes it harder for you when you don't actually just stick to something and become good at something and you just take a leap of faith on an idea. And like hustle culture is also that, right? Like we see like the absolute like tiny prick of an iceberg of how well this or this person did, and they quit their 9-to-5, they dropped out of the thing, and
you
now
can also say like
they're a celebrity online.
But you know what is funny? It's like, like the common thing that they had was that they dropped out of college. You're like, yeah, you could also say that it's the common thing that they have 2 legs or 2 arms or whatever. Like that's not that is not like there's a lot of high school dropouts or university dropouts who didn't go anywhere. And I think the only thing that I can say is that these people were just like freaking brilliant. They had,
I think it's right idea at the right time, right moment.
But it's also that Bill Gates, like he had been doing like computer science already when he was like 12 or something. I read that his parents either bought him a computer at a time where it was, and
nobody else had.
Yeah, at a time that nobody had it. So he had access to something. He had at least like 10 years of time to like master that thing. So by the time he went to university, he already had the skills. Like he can't really study anything in the university that's going to be taught to him.
Yeah.
So, and like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to drop out of university. Like, no, you should stay there. You should, because you have no real life experience and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I would say a lot of people would benefit from college, and it's sad that it's so expensive in the US.
Yeah.
Because
definitely the ROI is not there.
Yeah.
In the US, it's not.
But
in
like
North America,
thinking of myself at 18, 19, I did not know anything about real world.
Mhm.
And like getting out of like just like high school and going to university, it's a completely different structure, but it's also, it was really beneficial. Like the time I spent in university, would recommend to everyone.
Yeah.
But yes, then we have, of course, the anti-ambition movement, which is so interesting. As I said, I noticed a lot on YouTube and also a bit of on Twitter that there were these videos of I don't dream of labor.
Mhm.
And it was videos of essentially, you know, very dreamy. A lot of them were girls, very dreamily shot. You know, I don't have the ambition to climb the corporate ladder, do this and that, and like sit behind my laptop, and it's like soul crushing. And this is a very privileged take to have, because the reality is that I don't think anybody really dreams of labor. Like I never dreamt of like sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours as well. Like nothing glamorous about that. But like the reality is that a lot of us, exactly, we need to pay the rent. We need to eat. We have responsibilities. Some people have families. You need to put the food on the table. So yeah, I don't dream of labor, but like I do what I can. Yeah. So,
and I think a lot of that kind of disillusionment has, you know, fueled movements like tradwives or like, you know, homesteading or whatever, because it's like we don't have the incentive in the normal kind of corporate 9 to 5 to take a lunch break and go to the farm, like I did with some, you know, coworkers a few weeks ago, where like literally drove 10 minutes to just go eat, you know, next to the lovely sheep. And
Finland luxuries.
Yes. And it's like the whole kind of dream of like going off the grid and like all of that is just, it's basically like burnout. Like people are burnt out from being disconnected to what it is to be human, what it is to just be an alive organism, you know?
Yeah.
And so when, you know, there's been so many ways of companies trying to be like, okay, let's have like a, you know, puppy day or whatever, where people bring their pets and like daycare space so that you can bring your kids and kind of feel like it's like, that is not the solution. The solution isn't bringing your home into your work, is like hiring the right people that are responsible, that are adults, that like have clear understanding of what the problem they're trying to solve is, and then just like letting them be and not make them feel guilty for taking an hour lunch because they want to go have a walk in the forest so that they can actually remember what it is to be alive, like daily. They don't need to like take 2 weeks out of the year to feel like they're humans again, you know?
Well, I would say it also comes down to the people, like if they recognize that this is what they need, like if they're feeling off, like do I need to like quit my job and like move to a farm, or with just like taking care of myself and like putting in these boundaries and like, all right, like I'm gonna, after work or during lunch, I'm gonna go for a walk, because a lot of people don't do that. And like there's people who think that everything is so urgent that they need to like sit and like eat behind their laptops instead of like going for a walk. So that's it's not all just employers.
No.
It's a lot of also people themselves realizing that, hey, I'm gonna feel amazing if I take this like 15-minute break and like step away from my computer.
But I guess so. I used to be that person that used to eat in my computer, not always, but often enough. And because everybody else does it. And there is no kind of like, you're kind of made to feel guilty for not socializing during lunchtime with your coworkers, for not hanging out with them after work, for, you know, like all these kinds of things where it's like, if you're made to feel guilty because you're taking 2 weeks off because your kid was born, which I have heard from personal friends and family, like back home, there is paid time off.
Yeah.
Dads typically get 5 weeks. And I have heard of many friends that have been guilted into only taking 2 weeks out of their vacation because they see it as a vacation. And it's like, even if it's not, like, they can't technically fire somebody, right?
Yeah.
But even if it's like, oh, haha, who's going to take care of your emails while you're gone? As a joke. And it's like, I don't care. Like, that's your deal.
Look, I'm gonna be in labor. Like, I don't.
Well, these are dads, right?
Oh
like,
my
I'm
God.
talking about dads here, right? So
Oh, yeah,
where
okay.
I'm from, like, moms typically take a year,
Yeah.
and then dads have.
That's not what they have in Canada.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. They have.
Yeah, Canada is truly what America should have been.
Well, but here's the thing, right? Technically, it's parental leave for most of it,
Yeah.
but people still call it mat leave, even though it's technically shared. We shared it. We did 6 months each, right? People were like, "Oh, you're so nice to having shared it with your husband," and I'm like, "It's called parental leave. I didn't share it. We agreed together as two parents responsible for a human to take this much shared, right?" And so, even with whatever we've been taught is a thing in the modern 9 to 5 work culture, it's still like, well, he's going to check your emails while you're holding your wife's hand while she's giving birth. Oh, haha, I guess nobody. It's a joke, but it's not, right? So,
it's, again, humans being so disassociated with what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
That all you can think about is like making almost like a joke, like that their job is somehow like
the only thing that they have in life.
Right? Like the business is jeopardized because you're not responding to emails. Like, yes. You know what, Jim?
Yeah.
Maybe I will CC you in that email thread and you can respond to these emails.
For 2 weeks. Oh, boohoo. Yeah, exactly. Right? And it's almost like the disillusionment with like 9 to 5 or corporate work stems from the general culture of feeling like it's your whole life or not. And because that's not sustainable, people disassociate after a while or burn out after a while. And then they're like, I guess it's all or nothing, and I guess it's nothing. So I'm leaving the life or whatever. And then they're like, what's the alternative? I can be my own boss. It's like, if there was kind of like a more moderate understanding that like none of this is saving lives. Most people in the world do not actually work in critical jobs. The people that do, they're doing amazing work. And we are not talking about those people. They are underpaid, by the way, most of them. So everybody else does not have a job that if you like don't answer for a week, nobody's gonna notice.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that the job is bullshit. Yes, you can still do good work and you can still contribute to society with that job, but the like sense of like constant urgency is insane. And no wonder people burn out and then say that 9 to 5 is a scam.
Yeah.
Of course. Because it feels like unrealistic, right?
What is like interesting is like, I guess it's the burnout and the disillusionment and a bit of that like return to office like mandates. So what I've been reading about a lot is the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
I've probably heard about that. And going back to the kind of like US market, like in US alone, 50 million US workers quit their jobs in 2022. And that was like a record of people quitting in 1 year. And the year before, it was 48 million quitters.
That's insane.
And sure enough, there's probably in that number also people who weren't like, they weren't let go, but they were nudged or pushed to quit.
Yeah.
Which I've heard about a lot. It's just, businesses like to do that.
Yeah.
But
here's a package where you agree to quit and we're going to still pay you for 6 months to shut your mouth. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
I would say that definitely, with the COVID-19 pandemic creating tighter labor market, especially the lower wage service occupations, I feel that workers with this like great resignation, it's almost like not only recognizing that these people deserve more, but they started like almost demanding it. And if they didn't like get it, then they felt like that, yes, we can leave.
Yeah. Now we're stuck in a situation where people are not actually able to get jobs. So after this
Yes.
great resignation, now we're kind of like in a space where companies are like, oh, okay, a lot of those were actually like busy work.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're just going to pile on whoever we have left and use AI to fill in the rest of the gap. And it's
Oh
like,
my god, yeah, it's the craziest thing. Like we don't need people anymore because we have AI.
yeah, well,
We still need a person to prompt the AI. So it's not like
and
if you
even
fired
then,
5 people
yeah.
and you have one AI, like one person with
Yeah.
AI, you're not gonna get the output of 5 people.
And like that's this whole other episode. AI in marketing, like how scammy is
AI
actually
legit? Oh my god.
and like the bubble is going to burst at one point
It's
around
already
Gen
bursting.
AI.
You saw
But it's
people
not,
are recognizing it.
they are, but it's not, it hasn't fully burst yet.
Yeah, it's not burned anyone critically yet. That's why it's
No.
like thinking about like whether 9 to 5 is a scam. There's a very interesting TikTok account that I found. It's called Hub's Life.
Mhm.
So it's a creator called Connor, and his entire thing he's labeled as the 9 to 5 guy.
Mhm.
So in his content, you will see, they're pretty much the opposite of this like hustle culture, or like whatever you would see in like digital nomad videos. And
Mhm.
even like his TikTok bio says, normalize the norm.
Yeah.
So his videos are titled like Life After College, Working a 9 to 5 Job, or Day in the Life of a Middle Class Man Working a 9 to 5 Job. And they're pretty much exactly what you would expect with these titles. So Connor, who always has like the most bored face ever, like deadpan, anything that he does. And like obviously he's acting, but
Yeah.
like it's amazing. So he's doing like mundane daily things like having his morning coffee, getting dressed for work, packing his bag, like just sliding this laptop in like really, really slowly. And his Stanley Cup, he grabs it, he drives to work, he sits in this cubicle, does his gym, microwave dinner, TV, and it's always like accompanied by like this classical music, like this very like quiet, like calming. And it's so amusing to like read the comments on his videos because they're split between, wow, this life seems so like lovely and nice, or wow, this is like depressing, like you seem like you're not happy. And it's I would say that Connor is clearly doing it as a joke,
Yeah.
but almost like in some of his videos, like he puts like these Easter eggs where he put like a watermelon in his like backpack instead of a laptop for work.
Yeah.
So that was like funny, but like also his face is like, it's pretty much like almost like overacting that he's like sad, and he does these like things in the mirror like when he gets ready, like as if he's like practicing his like smile, like fake smiles.
So my question is, does he have a 9 to 5?
He does.
And so this is his side hustle, isn't it?
Exactly. But you know what is like fun is that I found a video of him like telling his like story and how he wanted to become a content creator. That didn't work out. So he was like, I need to go and do just like 9 to 5. And he was like, well, I still love to create content. So that was him. Like that was his outlet. Like, let me just document my life.
Hobby.
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
And of course he's now making some money out of it, but it's still a side hustle. And I really love some of his content where it's like, that's what I want to do. I want to normalize the norm. And I don't want to have these like, I'm not selling you some kind of a guide or, some get rich scheme. I'm just here, a normal guy. I'm creating content from my 9 to 5. And like some of his videos are like, this is being an entrepreneur versus this is you being a 9 to 5 guy.
Yeah.
And like some of the things like, okay, like if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have like health insurance. Yeah. You are most likely working alone versus 9 to 5. You have this like corporate protection. So, there's like some like people making fun of him, like, oh my God, get out of the matrix. But I'm like, I feel like it's nice among all the content that we see, like this glamorous travel and like people wanting to be like content creators and like influencers. It's almost like refreshing.
Yeah. I think it almost kind of brings back original like meaning behind like multimedia, social media, you know what I mean? Like where, you know, it's supposed to be fun and it's become a job. And anytime you make something into a job, it ruins it.
Being fun.
It ruins the whole thing, you know? And like, it's interesting that that's the angle that he's taking, because I definitely agree with him that like, you know, like get something that pays the bills so that you have time to do the fun stuff. And if the fun stuff is this, then that's great. And if you can monetize the fun stuff, then sure.
That's amazing.
But once you start monetizing the fun stuff, it becomes a job and eventually you get burnt out of it anyway. So do you just want to keep it fun and not actually monetize so that you can actually keep on enjoying it more than 2 seconds?
Yeah. And I really loved a message in his, like, there was like one video where he had this like text overlay. I'm going to read it. So, welcome to the normal side of social media. No get rich quick schemes, no buy my course tactics. Just a normal guy that has to work for a living, where we appreciate the things we have. Instead of chasing what we want, we find joy in the process, and you'll find joy in your life. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Connor, Hub's Life on TikTok, if you want to look it up. Amazing. But yeah, 9 to 5, it can be a scam if you let it be a scam. And I feel like it's a lot of like hit and miss. Like if you're in a desperate place, if you have little experience, work experience in general, like it's not that the 9 to 5 is a scam, but you can get exploited.
Yeah.
But if you're a little bit more into your career, you have a little bit more like leverage and what you can like negotiate, then I would say that 9 to 5 is great. And that's coming also from me who, you know, I started out in a 9 to 5 and I was like, fuck, this is depressing.
Yeah.
I moved to China. I had to do the 996. That's where I was like, I wish I could have my 9 to 5 back.
Yeah.
And now that I'm in Finland, I feel that I have the trust from my employer. I can work more, I can work less if I want to. And I almost like, I'm so appreciative of, you know, having that like fixed time, but also not being expected to like work till late.
Yeah.
And I've actually been able to like really make the most out of my time off work. So now I'm really good at like my, you know, workout routines. I did my entire like yoga teacher training in addition to my work. I've had so many like different hobbies. Like I picked up like Spanish. So I've done painting courses. Like I'm just like having fun. And it's just awesome to have these opportunities that in addition to work, I have like the space and the time to do all of these things that I've always wanted to do, but I've never really had time for. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the kind of key to making 9 to 5 sustainable is to figuring out what version of 9 to 5 works for you. Because 9 to 5 at a like 10-person startup is very different than 9 to 5 at a 10,000 person corporation, right? And understanding like, and the only way to understand that is to try them, right? Like I've worked in anything from a few people to like the biggest bank in the country. Like I've definitely done the whole spectrum. And not 9 to 5 is definitely my place, right? But I've tried the things. I'm not like, 19 and like, oh no, I don't want to do the thing, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also okay to like try it for a couple of years. Okay, this model doesn't work for me. Okay, try this other model, maybe closer, but maybe not the thing. And I think it's okay to like experiment in different settings, because not every setting will work. Like I've noticed, like we haven't technically worked together in now 2 years. And at that point, when I had joined back in 2021 or so, that size team, I was like, okay, I think this is pretty perfect. The company was like 150 people. The marketing team was like 8 people. I was like, this is good. It grew within the next year to a team of almost 30. And I stayed for another year after that, but I was like, I think this is pushing it. This is too big for me. And hyper specializing, it does not have enough like difference, does not have enough like diversity in the job that I do. And I'm a person that learns fast and then gets bored fast. And so it just wasn't working anymore. And the amount of layers and politics, I'm really bad at. I'm terrible at reading between the lines. If there are between the lines and I try to get clarification and I can't get an answer, then my brain's going to start filling in the gaps and I never get it right. And so that doesn't work for me. Right. So I need to be in an environment where there are enough people that there's like resources to share, but few people that you don't need to like start digging for an answer somewhere or another, and
you
then
can operate fast and autonomously.
And so like for me, if I would go back to kind of 9 to 5, like, and we've kind of toyed about that or whatever, I'd probably have to be in some kind of decision making position where I don't have to be guessing what the strategy is, because I'm pretty good at like solving puzzles. But if I'm in a position where that's not part of my job, my brain is automatically going to go in, that's not going to work. Or that's not, like, there's a piece missing here and there's a piece missing there. And like, no, this doesn't make sense. And then I get myself in trouble, And so, no, really though, like I'm questioning, like putting my nose in people's business where it doesn't belong. But that's the thing is, like, that's just the nature of how my brain functions. And so I can't be in that environment. Like, it's miserable for me. It's miserable for everybody else. Like, it just doesn't work. I get paranoid because I'm not getting the answers. It's not good. Then when it's pretty clear, like, okay, this is the problem that you're responsible for solving, no matter the means, right? That's where it works. So if I ever go in-house, or go back in-house to 9, more 9 to 5, that's kind of what the situation would kind of have to be. Like, actual trust of the understanding of the business problem that this function is supposed to solve, and like trust that like you'll figure it out.
But again, it's on the organization, that very specific team, right? Like, who's been hired to put this like team together, and who are in that team, and how do you click with that? And it's totally fine not to get that bond with people, and it's just luck a lot of the times.
It is.
Life is a box of chocolates, right?
For sure.
So if somebody goes and has like a really bad experience of the 9 to 5, is it the 9 to 5, or was it the team? Was there like a mismatch between someone's style of work with what is like expected in that team? So there's just so many other factors that it's so hard to like just say like 9 to 5 itself is a scam. There's just so many other factors that go into that. But I fully understand where people have those like multiple experiences, especially when it's a really tough job market. You don't really have like options available, so you take whatever you can and you're thankful for it, but you're like, why is this crushing my soul? Like, I'm doing everything right and I just don't. I can't.
I think you definitely hit something there. A lot of the time it's mismatch. And it's not about necessarily the company being terrible or the person being bad at their job. It's a lot of it is mismatched. Like, how the dynamics of this team functions doesn't jive with this particular person. Not that they're bad, not that the team's all bad or whatever. Just like the dynamics are not there, and that's okay. Now, I guess the problem comes when like people need money to like feed themselves, right? And so sometimes you're kind of stuck in the grind of like just dealing with not ideal situations because like, well, I gotta put a roof over my head. And after a while, it's not sustainable, and then you burn out, and then it's like, well, the only Band-Aid is like freaking duct tape, and I gotta like piece out from 9 to 5 because I've been doing it for too long in an environment that wasn't ideal and a fit that wasn't ideal. And now that's it. Like, my brain just can't take it. So now I'm homesteading, like, or whatever. Right. Like, so, but you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like, and that's also a thing, like maybe that's what's missing in school, like understanding what like your individual, like ideal performance situation is, and being able to identify like what that looks like in work.
Yeah. It's a lot of like, emotional maturity that people need to reach. And some people reach it later, and
some people will never reach it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where we have these like anti-work communities where people are like, oh, the work is dumb. Like get rid of the, like, get out of the matrix and start your own like hustle.
Yeah. I think, a big thing that has been more like embedded in culture is like, okay, the way to have stability in your life, you pick a lane, you pick a career, you study the thing, and then you work there for 30 years in the same field. You might change companies, but you're basically doing the same job. You might go up the corporate ladder, but the path is kind of really clear. And I would actually beg to differ that it actually is worse for the actual output of performance of a person to not having done different things, because it puts you in this really strong silo, and it makes it really hard to work with actually people outside of that silo, and it makes it really hard to actually see different perspectives and point of views. So I would argue that it should almost be kind of mandatory to like side upskill, not necessarily to like do another job, but like, I think the whole kind of mentality of like, okay, the only way to be stable in your life is choose a lane, be really good at it, and then just go in that direction, has also made people feel like 9 to 5 is that. Versus, and it's also hard, like I have such a weird generalist scattered background that sometimes I can apply for a job. I don't apply for jobs anymore, but like, I can apply for a job, and then, whoever's recruiting is like, what? Like, you've done this and this and that. Like, are you specialist enough? And I'm like, I don't think y'all realize that, like, I change sectors because I get bored. I learn really fast. And so if I'm doing this now, it's because I'm half decent at that. And like, I'll probably do really, really good for the how many years. And then I'll most likely either like sidestep in the same company, but that's not how the corporate life is meant for at the moment still.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like that. They're like, I do the thing. And after 10 years, they're like, okay, but like, I'm kind of tired of doing the thing. Maybe I'd like to like try something else that's adjacent. And then it's like, oh, but then who's going to do your job? Okay, somebody else who wants to learn. Like, I don't know. I can train, like, and so, yeah, there's definitely I just want to do my job and, go home and do something else and all that. But then if the interest, like the diversity in like, the actual work isn't there for a lot of people, it's very disillusioning. It's like, are you saying I'm going to be doing the same thing for the next 30 years?
And I think what is interesting is like, you can definitely like even move within your organization, right? You don't have to like quit your job if you hate it, or like
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Well, yeah, true.
Because a lot of orgs might actually like not be too happy about that.
Yeah, true. Because then it's like, all right, like you, as you said, like you're quitting this place.
And now you're starting lower because you don't know the other thing. So now we need to train you on the other thing. And then that's a problem. And it's like, well, sure. But then you lose somebody who's already invested in the company. Is that better? Maybe it's just better to sidestep people sometimes and be like, yo, you want to try something else? Yes, let's try something else.
Yeah.
And that's fine,
Anyway, so the verdict is that 9 to 5 probably isn't a scam.
It's not a scam, but is it fully legit? I think it's a gray zone. For me, it's a gray zone because I don't think the problem is the 9 to 5.
So 9 to 5s are not, they're legit. There are layers and layers within the 9 to 5s that make our potential scams, like if we're getting exploited.
Well, to be fair, I think the actual 9 to 5 concept is not legit. Like, I think that's quite suspicious. No, but listen,
Well,
here's my
100
argument.
years ago, that's what people wanted.
But here is my argument to that. I own your time from 9 to 5, and I own your brain space from 9 to 5. For me, that is suspicious. The legit part, you can work a day job, you can work a corporate, I'm an employee. So the actual like being an employee and like having like, I work normal office hours, that's fine. But I think the mentality that comes with your brain is on at 9 and your brain can shut off at 5 is not nuanced enough for humans. Do you know what I mean? Especially knowledge workers. So like I would claim that it's a real, it depends. It's a real like the you can't like force people to shut it off and on. It doesn't work that way, right?
But is it a question of the employer thinking that way? Whereas like some employers are reasonable and they're like, look, you can like I can start at 10 or 11 oftentimes and I can work later as well, and that's fine. And nobody's giving me crap about it. So I think I wouldn't say it's like a 9 to 5 issue. It's just like it's more about like having the aligned
But you're not doing 9 to 5, are you?
But it's more about like aligning the working time with everybody else. So you have that like support and you're available and you can like interact with your colleagues. So you can like all work to that same goal.
Yeah. I think
but like if I decide to like, work earlier or like a little later, like that's my own thing.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I see like the concept of 9 to 5 as very literal in the sense that like I pay you to do a job and you will be available no matter what we ask during these hours, and that I own you for that time, right? And I think a lot of people might see it maybe differently, where like, well, 10 to 4 some days, and I'm like, no, but for me, the concept is I own you and your time. That's why I feel like the actual, like, I don't know, it's different. I see it differently, at least, than working for somebody else. Being an employee, like being an employee in a corporate environment and the 9 to 5 structure of show up at an office and be present 9 to 5 or sign into the thing digitally 9 to 5. I think that part of the control over things that are ultimately irrelevant, I think that is bogus.
Yeah.
I'm very little of a person.
Yeah. Well, no, it's fine because I guess like that's like my experience has been that like 9 to 5 has never been really 9 to 5. Like I have a tendency to be late everywhere and nobody's giving me crap because like nothing happens if I come in at like 9:30 or 10 because like I don't work with like unless there's a client meeting or like a meeting with my team member at 9 a.m. like nothing's gonna happen. And like it's very often like even if I'm not in the office, I'm still responding to somebody on Slack. Maybe in the off hours, maybe I'm writing a Slack message in the evening and then I'm scheduling for the next day 9 a.m. So to me it's kind of like as long as my work is done, like the 9 to 5 is kind of like you can book my time within those like slots, but like will I might work later or earlier. So to me personally, it has not been. I realized that I've been very lucky in my work experiences and career so far. But yeah, to me, it's not a scam. But we will leave that up to the listeners. We've had hopefully a very nuanced discussion between me and Soph with our very different viewpoints and experiences. So what do you think, listeners? Is the 9 to 5 a legit or is it a scam?
See you next time.
See you next time.
Dear listeners, please note that the views and opinions in this episode, like all episodes of Like Is This Legit, do not reflect the official position of the podcast and are the hosts and guests' subjective opinions and quoted allegations. The content from each episode of Like Is This Legit should not be taken for indisputable fact and should be viewed as an educational starting point for listeners. All content shared by our hosts, guests, and sponsors are their own opinions and are not meant to defame or misrepresent any business, group, organization, individual, anyone, or anything. Just don't scam people, okay? Okay.